we covered some really important ground for making motivational interviewing work. Because what we did was we talked really kind of about the philosophy, the underpinnings of motivational interviewing, what the spirit is. And as part of that, we also talked about helping participants to set life goals as opposed to program goals. Because what we want to do is try to help them to move out of their comfort zone into, if you recall, their learning, their challenge zone, and being able to have a vision for how things could be better really helps people to reach for that new vision, gets them to get some energy to start. So, as part of that, then our last session, we talked about change talk, and we looked at how do you identify it. So you might recall that there's a difference between change talk, I want to get my GED, versus sustained talk, which is I don't see how getting my GED would help me, or somebody saying I just don't have time right now, anything that gets in the way of them moving forward. So the point that I was making in the earlier session, because we're about to build on all that, so I just want to refresh your memory, is that the more people talk about making a change, the more likely they are to make that change. So we talked a little bit that a participant can make change talk spontaneously. I mean, they could, when they first walk in, or, in case management, just say, I think I just really need to get a job, or I need to get a job right now, or I'd really like to work toward my GED. That's change talk. But it isn't, I didn't evoke it. They came in thinking that. So that's what I call spontaneous. And then the other methodology is the case manager is going to work in order to try to evoke it. So today, what I want us to spend some time looking at is how do you evoke it? And then we're going to talk about how do you respond when somebody makes change talk? What would be, what would be the appropriate responses? We're only going to probably have time to go over one of those today, and we'll pick up the next skill at the next session. So the five critical motivational interviewing skills that we'll be working on over the next few webinars. First one is asking open-ended questions. And we talked about that a little bit during the live sessions. We're really going to drill it down today. Giving affirmations is the second of the critical skills. And you give affirmations because you might recall from our last session that when somebody's going to make change, they have to have some level of confidence that they could make the change, that the change would make a difference. And when you're working with people who have low self-esteem, one of the things what we've got to do is build up their belief in themselves. And so affirmations can help on that path. Third one is asking permission. And what that is going to involve, and we'll go into that much more in depth, but basically you don't give advice unless somebody asks you for it. You don't give information unless you've asked permission to give it, because you always, always, always want the participant to be in the driver's seat. We're going to talk about using reflective listening, which is also sometimes called empathetic listening, active listening, lots of different terms for this skill. And then also summarizing anything that we've agreed on so that we can make sure that we're all clear and there are no misunderstandings about who's doing what and when. So understanding change and how people change is really essential, because change really is the essence of motivational interviewing. So each of these skills are going to be required to implement. Again, we also have to have the philosophy, we have to have the spirit, but each one of these takes practice to master it. And they also take a little bit of practice just knowing when to use them. So that's why one of the things that, I'll say now, but I have a feeling I'll say multiple times through the next few webinars, is that as you're learning these skills, some of these probably you're already doing. And so then all you'll be doing is reinforcing those skills. But as you learn a new skill, or these motivational interviewing skills, it might be I don't know, a prudent. It might make it easier if you like adopt one skill, like asking open-ended questions, and you practice that skill, or we're also going to go over affirmations. Practice those over the next 2 weeks so that you're more comfortable with them. And then we'll move on and we'll do asking permission using reflective listening. But what I found when I was trying to learn how to do motivational interviewing, it's overwhelming and gets confusing if you're trying to do it all at once. You have to perfect one, move to the next, perfect that one, move to the next. So once you get it, then you move to the next skill. So in going back, so those are the skills that we'll cover, but we're going to look at how do you then evoke change talk. And one of the things we talked about that right at the end of the last session is one way that you evoke change talk is to ask open-ended questions, because, and what we want to do is we want to encourage it and we want to reinforce it as much as we can as we're case managing, counseling, career coaching. So we are going to evoke it and we want to increase the frequency. So the one way to do that is to ask the right kinds of questions. So what we want to do is we want to ask questions that help people to see themselves changing. And I'm going to give you lots of examples. In fact, you're going to be sick of the examples and go, okay, I get it. But I'll give them to you anyway. You want to ask the kinds of questions that help people to articulate, to talk about the benefits of changing, of seeing some of maybe the difficulties in their situation, but what methodology, what strategies, what things they're willing to do, they're willing to invest in order to get to whatever the goal is, whatever the outcome is. And we want to ask a lot of questions that get them to express their desire to make a change. So if what we're trying to do is get them to move out of their comfort zone and into the learning zone, then open-ended questions is going to be a key skill. So the type of questions that evoke change talk are always open. Closed questions do not evoke any type of change talk. So I'm going to give you examples of both, and then we'll have a little well, like online quiz to see well, or maybe I'll have you write some or think of some. But let's look at some open-ended questions. So these are not in any particular order, and in fact they cover disparate topics. So it's not like you would ask this in chronological order to a participant, but I might say to them, what steps, if any, have you taken to figure out what it is that you want to do? And so they can tell me what they've thought about, what, you know, whether or not they've taken an assessment, whether or not they've looked at jobs online, but what steps, if any, have you taken? And another one, if you could do things all over again, now this one would be more to me for somebody who's a little older, but if you could do things all over again, would you choose the same path for yourself? What kinds of things would you change? Or are you more interested in finding a job that is similar to your past jobs? Or are you more interested in switching careers, and why? So what I want you to do is, or what I want you to see or hope that you see is all of these questions are just opening up the floor to let them talk and let them tell you their story. So what jobs have you considered doing, and what have you already eliminated as options, and what steps are you ready to take to begin to move forward from, and I made this up, from seasonal or part-time work to year-round work or to full-time work, whatever the situation would be. But open-ended questions, I want you to see, none of these can be answered with a yes, no, or as an answer, or a simple phrase, like a simple phrase, Jody, where do you live? a simple phrase, 101 Hickory Lane, Annapolis, Maryland. It's, what high school did you go to? Waynesburg Central. It's a phrase. It's not yes, no. It's still a closed question. So what you want to do is use these open-ended questions to start a person thinking and talking about making change. What they do again is they allow people. It gives people the freedom to talk, to tell their story, to create some forward momentum. And I think most importantly, honestly, it builds relationships. So what we want to do is use these questions to understand their point of view and really kind of elicit their own feelings about the subject. So for example, I work with youth. You guys know that when I first got started, and they had all left high school prior to high school graduation. Well, one of the components of our program was getting a GED. And by the way, if you didn't want a job, a GED, and to join our youth group, you really were not appropriate for our program because we were, sort of, I guess, like if you want to say it that way, one size fit all. Like you couldn't pick and choose. If you took one thing, you had to take the whole thing. But I needed to know what youth felt about going to school because they were going to be sitting in GED classes. Like what kind of emotions did that raise up for them? Some people were made fun of in school. They were bullied in school. Most of them just did not have a good experience. And so I needed to know that so that, as we're working with them in the classroom, sort of we know what we're up against, but they've also had this opportunity to express it. So the idea behind all of these questions is that the participant should be doing most of the talking. If someone talks about, like as an example, why I should restart my exercise program, I'm a whole lot less likely to restart it than if I'm the one doing the talking and convincing myself. So what we're trying to do is create this climate where the participant feels safe, kind of exploring their ideas, their thoughts, their ambivalence. Now, again, I don't have to ask every one of these questions because I know that we also have limited time. And we'll get to this later, but I do want to deal with that right now. Sometimes it might be you could be working with a participant. Some participants, it's like getting them to talk is like pulling teeth. They don't really want to say anything, and you have to establish a lot of trust before they're going to tell you much. And others get what I call like verbal diarrhea. Like you can't make them stop. Like once you ask a question, they're telling you everything. I mean, I have friends that are like that. And it's like hard to pull away from them. So sometimes with participants, and I'll give you examples of that. I might say, like, I'm looking at our time together, and we have about 10 minutes left. And there are a couple things that I want to make sure that, we get to during this session. So let me make a note and we can come back and pick up wherever they've left off at this point. But you can control, what I'm saying is it's okay for us to control how much, if somebody is going on and on, so that we don't spend our entire time hearing about all the steps that they've taken in order to figure out what they want to do. So I think that's why it's important. I think I said that at one of the other sessions, is that you always tell people what's the agenda, what is it that you want to cover, so that mentally they can see where it is that we're headed. Now, the opposite of open questions are closed questions. And closed questions give you the parameters of those. Those can be responded to with a brief word or a concise, like factual response, like what is the last grade that you completed? And I would say the postgraduate degree, or somebody might say 12th grade or whatever. It's a factual. So like with you guys, it might be like, do you live in Illinois? Have you ever applied? Where have you applied for jobs? Can you give me the list? How many children do you have? Those are all closed questions. So typically, closed questions are used to just gather information. They're not used to foster a relationship. If I ask somebody how many kids they have, or if they live in Illinois, or if they have a driver's license, not like they're getting warm feelings from me. They're just helping me to fill out a form. So oftentimes, conversations are curtailed by asking closed questions. People tend to answer exactly what is asked, and they try to help the questioner by not elaborating too much. So you end up with all this dead space. And so there ends up being pregnant pauses in between the questions as the person just waits for the next question. So closed questions, also another problem that you have with closed questions is they guide the discussion in a direction that is determined by the person doing the questioning. So the questioner still has full control of the conversation's the direction. So as an example, maybe the case manager, the career coach says, have you ever considered returning to school? And the participant says, yeah, I've thought about it. But in a flash, although the participant doesn't say it, but in their mind's eye, but they're thinking, but I can't because I already have an outstanding student loan, or I can't because I owe too much money at the last school I went to, or whatever it is they're thinking. But the case manager goes on to ask in that closed question, have you considered returning to school? Yes, I have. What would you like to study? So now you see that we're going in the direction of the questioner rather than staying right with where the participant is at. So I've changed the course of the conversation, and it directs the person away from talking about this outstanding student loan, which, by the way, would be really good information to have. So a better question might have been, well, what are your thoughts about returning to school or going to training? What might be some pros and cons? And then the person be like, well, I have outstanding student loans, or what wherever it is that they want to go. So the key thing, and the reason that it's important to understand the difference, is that while closed questions are sometimes necessary to get one little factual piece of information that I need, they do not elicit change talk. So examples. Did you graduate from school? Are you willing to, it should be attend a job club meeting? Let me make a note on here before I send the handout out. I'll make that correction. Have you applied to any type of training or schooling? Are you interested in looking for a job? How many children do you have? What are their ages? Have you ever been in a workforce program before? Do you have any criminal convictions on your record? And have you ever thought about getting your GED? These questions do not get people to contemplate talking about change. Again, they're data gathering. So they tend to shut down conversation. They just answer the question, move on. And in a sense, I think it trains people, these type of questions train people not to reveal, because it doesn't really sound like we're interested. We're just interested in the facts. So let's look at a side-by-side example. And because I think that this illustrates the concept. So on the closed question side, I have, what is the highest grade that you've completed? Or maybe I'm talking to somebody who just was at a job club or the orientation, or one of the workshops that are offered by the program or the One Stop. Or I want to know, like, where have you worked before? And so I ask on the second one, I guess I should say, did you enjoy the workshop? All of those can be answered with, did you enjoy the workshop? Yes. Where have you worked before? McDonald's. What's the highest grade you completed? 12th. Closed questions. So if we look at then a open-ended version of the question, oops, did I just do that? Trying to move all the pictures out. Okay. Is talk to me about your schooling and education from high school on. So what I want you to see is, I think the material that is covered is identical. It's just that the answers are likely to differ. I'm still going to find out if I say talk to me about your schooling and education from high school on. I'm still going to find out what grade what their highest grade they completed was. So I still get that information. Did you enjoy the workshop? I would reword it to what'd you think of the workshop? And like open the conversation. And then where have you worked before? Please share a bit about your work history, including your role, your job title, how long you worked there, and your reason for leaving that job. So it's again, it gets people to tell the story. I think open-ended questions give you much richer information about the participant, so you can understand, in a sense, what they're facing, what their thoughts are, what their experiences are, and what their readiness is for moving forward. But all of these will lead to, hopefully, to change talk. So what I want to do is we're going to work together to turn some closed questions into open-ended questions. So you have your choice. You can chat, you can use chat, or you can unmute. I guess I should ask, maybe I just told you what the advantages of the questions are. Well, I'll ask you that again here in a second. Okay, so here are 5 closed questions. Do you have the financial resources to support yourself and your family during the entire duration of the training? That's a yes, no, closed. Do you have any barriers that need to be resolved before you can go to work or go to school? And you already know, and I'll bring it up again, hate the word barriers, but it's either yes or no, or they'll say childcare, transportation, whatever. Would you like me to sign you up for one of our job search workshops? No, not really. Are you going to get a job as soon as you finish high school or as soon as you finish school? I guess. And how many jobs have you applied for since layoff? 4. So none of those require, they're not open-ended. So what I've given you is a little cheat sheet on the left, on the right-hand side. So this is the way in which you start open-ended questions. And I know it will sound crazy, but when I am like creating questions or creating a desk guide, we'll talk about that in a bit. I always have like this kind of cheat sheet in front of me because it just helps my brain get in gear. So what have you found? Why? How? This the way you start an open-ended question. Tell me a little bit about, I'm not really certain I understand something you just said, and tell them what you think you heard. Can you give me an example? Can you tell me a little bit more about XYZ? So all of those begin open-ended questions. So here's our challenge. We're going to start with the first one. Are you financially prepared to support yourself and your family throughout the entire training period? So using chat or unmute, can you turn that from being a closed question, a transactional type question, into an open-ended questions? Most, by the way, initial assessments that I've seen sort of follow this left-hand format. And so I think it's really important to get to this right-hand side. So I'm going to look at chat or listen for somebody to be brave and unmute. I'm pulling this up. Let's see. How do you plan on supporting yourself and your family? Good. Can you describe for me your current financial situation and how you plan to support yourself through the entire duration of the training? Good. Tell me, Francisco, tell me about your current financial situation. Okay. More? Others? How are you financially prepared to support yourself and your family through the entire training period? Okay, good. And how are you, what steps will you take to help support yourself financially during the training? I like all of those. I like them all because it puts the issue on the table, and it lets, like in a sense, it lets people think and problem solve their own situation. And it's we'll talk about this in a bit. Again, it doesn't make me as the participant feel like I'm being judged. It sounds like we're having a conversation and trying to figure things out. So here's my version, kind of shorter than yours, but it's there. How would you support yourself and your family if you went to training? If you decided that you wanted to go to training. So again, I think we've all said the same things. Next, are there any obstacles you need to address before you can begin working or attending school? How can we reword that? Tell me about your home life. Good. Melissa, what challenges do you currently have in terms of attending school? Is there anything that you think, Kelly, if you were instead of is, because is can lead to a yes no, is a talk to me about anything that you think would impact your success at school. Kelly, when you think about beginning work or attending school full time, it just scrolled up. What would limit you from starting that, or what might get in the way? Can you describe any obstacles you would need to address before you can begin working? Do you have any challenges prior to starting school, William? That's a yes, no. So it would be talk to me about any challenges you see that you would need to resolve before starting school. So that more opens it. And then Rachel has tell me about personal, oh, just popped away before you can begin working. So what's stopping you? Can you tell me if any challenges will affect or attend? Are you working full or part-time? That's 173206. That is a closed question. So I might want to say, if I were doing financial, that oftentimes when people go to school, they find that they're going to need to do part-time work. Can you talk to me about what you're currently doing, part-time, full-time work, or how financially you might support yourself? So let me go on and I'm going to show you mine. And here's my version. I'm sorry, I was doing what obstacles, and then I flipped back to the other one. When you think about going to school or returning to work, what other things in your life, legal, medical, caring for a loved one, housing, what other things going on in your life would you need to plan around? And the thing that I did in my answer, I had more time to think about it as well, is that I did try to give them categories of things that I see that oftentimes like are important things for us to know about, like legal issues, medical. And so I was just sort of like, putting some bait on the hook, I guess. When you think about that, what would we need to plan around? And again, I think that we'll get the similar kind of information. Would you be interested in registering for one of our job search workshops? How can we reword that? So it's an open-ended question. What's going on with your job search? How comfortable are you with interviewing? What makes you nervous? And I like those, Melissa, because that's going to that gives people a chance to talk themselves into wanting to go to the workshop. Because if they say what makes me really nervous is sometimes like I don't know what they're going to ask, and then sometimes my mouth gets dry and my tongue gets thick, and I think I just need more practice. Then the workshop, they just sold themselves on going. What are your thoughts and how do you feel about joining one of our job search workshops to support your employment goals? Good. Finding out their thoughts and their feelings, their emotion about it. Which of these job search workshops would you be most interested in attending, and why? Good. And William, that one is an open-ended question. So good. And then I'll show you mine. Move on. So how might refreshing your job search skills help you to find a job faster and more efficiently? So again, I'm just trying to ask the question in such a way so I get them to sell themselves. And again, to make the whole goal of this is to get them to make change talk and to work through their own challenges, their own ambivalence. And then our last one, since your layoff, how many jobs have you applied for and where have you submitted your applications? How would I re Oh, I guess I skipped one. Sorry. Do you plan on attending, or do you plan to secure a job immediately after completing school? Let me not skip that. Let's discuss your plans for employment after you complete training. Tell me about your goals for after school. What next steps would you be excited about? Excellent. Tell me about your plans after school. Good. And here is, how do you plan to apply your education and goals after completing school? Here's mine. What do you plan to do immediately after you graduate? And if they're planning on looking for a job, that I had youth who would tell me, well, I'm going to need a break. Like they'd been to high school for 10 years and now they definitely they needed to like lay on the couch and take a break. Or if they'd gone to a 12-week like some kind of vocational training, it's like they needed a vacation. Like I would want to know that. And then since your layoff, how many jobs have you applied for and where have you submitted your applications? What's your ideal company you'd like to work for? What does a day of job searching look like for you? That's excellent. I like that second part especially. What strategies have you used to find and apply for jobs recently? And they'll tell you where they've applied and what they're doing. Excellent. Tell me about your job development efforts so far. Talk to me about your current job search, what's working, what's not, how it's going. Tell me about your experience with job application and where you've been focusing on your efforts. And what type of employers or positions have you been applying for recently? Love it. Opens it right up. And I said, I am interested in knowing about your job search since your layoff. What's been your strategy? And so again, what we're trying to do is elicit that change talk, and also just to be able to say, I'm here to listen. I'm here to to be on your side, but not take over. Remember, paternalistic counseling is me telling people what to do. Like if I said to a person, well, in order to look for a job or get a job, you really need to apply, make a job search a full-time job. That is your full-time job. So you should be applying to, 10 jobs a week. That's me taking over. And so it's far better, again, to ask them. So now let's try our hand at creating some open-ended questions about very specific topic areas. So I'm going to give you a situation. So you have an adult participant who does not have a high school diploma. What open-ended questions can you ask that, number one, keep the participant totally in the decision-making role? Second, allow them to talk freely. And third, hopefully we can come up with a few questions that do all three of these, get them to sell themselves. So our goal is to keep them in the decision-making role and give them space to tell their story. So what kind of things? Let's see. I'm over here on, you guys can, if it's easier for you to unmute, I'm happy to hear other people's voices, or you can go over here to chat.
Jody,
Yes.
it's Melissa.
Hey, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
Are you good?
I think I would ask the person like what kind of position where's my camera? Okay. What kind of position are you looking for? And what like what qualifications do you think you need, for this type of job, or have you researched it? Do you know what the qualifications are for the job so that we can talk about the education part?
Yeah.
'Cause
So,
once,
and I like where you're headed with that. It's that Talk to me a little bit about what types of jobs you're really interested in. What are the qualification, education requirements for somebody in that position that would
Right.
give them a leg up? And then we can back into like they go, well, and actually, I'll give you an example of this. My nephew is definitely in this position. He just graduated from college. He's had a very difficult time getting himself motivated to look for a job. You have no idea when you spend 40 some years in workforce and you got family members who are like, well,
Right.
oh, I mean, it just drives me nuts. But the problem is that he got a degree, and in all of the jobs that he is wanting to apply for, every one of them requires something like proficiency with Adobe or proficiency with some other like computer assisted design. He doesn't have any of those skills. So, like, I want to say, well, I'll pay for, and I'm willing to, I'll pay for an online class for you to take that. I'll give you a computer, a laptop, so that you can, I have an old one that, you can have that you could do all this stuff with. But he is just so resistant. But more recently, it's exactly what you said. He started reading job ads and he said, I realize I'm going to need to take an online class. And so now it's his idea. And so he's much more open. So you're exactly right. Then let me look. So excellent, Melissa. Hey, and don't be shy. You can be just like Melissa. And notice I didn't even like bite her head off or anything. So let's see, what types of employers have you been applying for? I'd be interested in knowing how many jobs apply. I'm back to that's education. So what have you been doing since high school? Get more details about where they're at. I noticed the job you applied for requires a high school diploma. What steps are you taking or have you taken, or are you willing to take to obtain your diploma? How much do you think that you would be making if you did obtain your high school diploma? And according to U.S. Department of Education, if there's anybody left working there, it's about $300,000 over the course of a working lifetime. So getting your education does have monetary value. Can you tell me about your journey so far? What experiences you've had that shaped you? What matters most to you in your life, and how might having an education help you get there? And wow, here's a bunch. What kind of skills or knowledge do you feel you would need to reach your career or personal goals? How do you see earning your high school diploma impacting your future? Excellent. Talking themselves into it. What types of jobs interest you most, and what draws you to them? That's a little bit of more on the interest side. I mean, I accept it here, but like if what I'm trying to do is get people to talk themselves into education, I would need to take that one step further. Like and I like this, what challenges have you faced in school or work before? How did you handle them? How might getting an education help? Again, putting it on them. Let me show you mine. Just in, and I don't think any of mine are perfect, but I was again trying to ask an open-ended question, keep them in the decision-making role, allow them to talk themselves into action. If you did decide that you wanted to get your GED, how might that benefit you? And what I want you to notice, even in that, is notice that instead of telling them, I'm asking them, and I'm trying to phrase it in such a way that, again, they sell themselves. How has not having your GED or diploma, how has that impacted you, if at all? And I had youth, even up to the age of 21, saying they couldn't get promoted, like even at like a food service restaurant, because they weren't a high school graduate. And so it does impact. And there are a lot, if like, I don't even understand it. There are a lot of employers who, like, for a housekeeper at a hotel, will say must have high school diploma. And it's like, really? For why? Like, explain that to me. Oh, I know people say because they have to be able to read the labels. Those labels are so small that you couldn't read them if you wanted to, like magnifying glasses. What, if anything, scares you about studying for the GED? What would have to happen to take that fear away? Talk to me about how many hours a week you have available to invest in getting a GED. How can you make this fit into your schedule? Or what changes would you need to make in your life to make this a reality? So, the thing and the reason I want to show you this, and I'll move through some here quickly, is that I mean, I think over the course of a year and working with clients, you're going to have a lot of people who come in who didn't complete their education. And so, what I want, that would be me, is something like that's a set of questions, a cheat sheet in a desk guide that as I see that they don't have their high school diploma, I can turn to that in my little cheat sheet 3-ring binder that I have that has to do with education so that I can just sort of guide myself through some of these questions. So another one is, let's say that I have an adult participant who has many challenges that need to be addressed, but I know I don't have the entire list. I had a lot again of youth who they didn't trust me enough to tell me things like they were in an abusive relationship. I just so many different things were going on in their lives. So how do I ask things in such a way to protect their self-esteem, keep the questions open, and allow them to the participant to tell the story? And Melissa, you raised your hand.
I did.
Yes.
I'll talk instead of type.
Good. Yay.
I think that I would acknowledge that the individual sitting in front of me, you are trying to accomplish a goal that you set for yourself. So let's talk about that goal and talk about how we're going to get there. And maybe we can discuss some things that have been a barrier. I don't want to say a barrier. I would say
That we would
that
need to
have got,
plan, that you want to
yeah,
plan around.
yeah, I would be like, what, what's gotten in your way, in the past? How can we circumvent those obstacles to get you where you want to be? So hopefully that would open up a whole conversation and we could address many things once we have a conversation started.
Right, exactly. And I like the way, where you're taking that, you're tying that to their goals and you're asking them like, or what things have gotten in your way in the past and, how might we work together in order to plan around those? So, any of those, I think any of those kind of statements that make support make me feel as a participant like you're not judging me, you're helping me. Anybody else over here? Oh, we did. And what are your plans? Okay. More? Is this? All right. Well, I'll show you mine because now you probably figured out that I also have them. Are there things that make daily life harder for you? It could be big or small, anything that you feel comfortable sharing. Rachel, in your answer, the R, when you start with R, it's a yes or no. So it just change that around a little bit. So it's like, what things in your daily life do you find, make going to school or going to work a challenge for you or harder for you? Tell me some, things that are going on in your daily life that you think that you would need to plan around. And so then we've taken away the are, if you say, are you, do you, have you, all of those things lead to yes, no. So good. So I said, when you think about going to school, returning to work, what kind of things are going on in your life? It's taken from the other slide. What would we need to plan around? Other than working with us, what other services or resources in the community have you accessed? How was that experience? What organizations have you found to be most helpful? What I want to find out is, are they going to food banks? Are they going to housing? Are they going to probation, parole? So I've kind of asked, I'm taking a back door to that. Can you tell me about any legal issues that could be a consideration for moving forward? I personally, if you ask me that, I would have no issue with it. I'd say, no, I don't have any legal issues. Or if I did, be more inclined to tell you. Some of our employers and occupations require drug testing to be hired. Some do hair samples, others do urine testing. Would that be something that we would need to consider as we plan? Why or why not? Because I don't know if you guys have that. I had a lot of employers, even way back in the day, that would do drug testing. And clients wouldn't tell me if they could pass or they would, or if they thought, well, actually, they would think that if they drank that, one of them thought that if you drank like a bottle of vinegar, that then that would overcome the drug test. And the drug test would, I mean, I don't know where they got this, eat rose hips and you would be able to pass. So I'm putting that on the table and talk a little bit about your general health and how any health concerns could impact your ability to participate. So I took specific categories and went down those categories to get them to reveal. And, you know, the thing that we talked about, I know, and we talked about, I believe we talked about it in both sessions, but I don't remember actually. But, you know, we don't, what the point is, we don't want to call it barriers. Barriers is language that makes people feel judged, makes them feel bad. Department of Labor uses it. Congress uses it, but I think it has to stop between me and my participant. So I think it's far better to say everybody has challenges in their life that we need to plan around. And so we all have things that we have to cope with. So I just want to talk to you about some challenges that you might face so that we can plan together to handle those and we can bring together whatever resources might be required. So what we're trying to do is reposition the negative into hopeful because I want a motivated client. And so what I don't want to do is neuter their confidence, like by saying something negative and barriers is negative. I mean, I think if any one of us heard that, like, well, let me tell you what your barriers are. And it's off-putting. And so then we got to work too hard to try to rebuild the relationship. So we want to take that away. And then I want to, as you look at your own method of interviewing or at the forms that you use, I am going to show you 5 questions, 5 topics. I'll go through them. I won't make you write them, but that we frequently do talk to participants about. And within those 5 questions, what I wanted to do was provide you some examples of the continuum of transforming these topics into questions. It's like a range. So we have at one end of the range is closed questions, at the other is open. And then somewhere in the middle is what I call sort of open. I mean, the middle is better than the closed question, but it's still not as good as the totally open question. So I'll try to go through these quickly, but have you ever been in a workforce program before? And I'm assuming that when we ask that, the reason we're asking is because we want information about that. Like the yes, no is not going to help me. Sort of open is tell me about any workforce programs that you've been in before. And yeah, I mean, it's much better than the closed, but I think the open ones are fully open are much better. Talk to me about your prior experience in workforce programs. What worked, what didn't work for you in those programs? And if they have never been in a workforce program before, that's going to come up. They go, well, I haven't ever been to one. Or I came in here a couple of years ago. Here's what happened as a result. So I'm still going to hear the story. Or if you've been in a work program like this, tell me what you learned in those programs that might be able to help you now. So again, it's I think what we're working toward, and you'll even see it, by the way, for those of you who do the homework, there'll be homework on this, testing your closed and open questions. But the fully open is better. So what I'm also trying to do, I think within this is give you lots of examples that you could use as you work with participants. So because I myself, I'm a show me type learner. So are you currently in training, high school, obtaining your GED? What's the highest level of education that you've completed, et cetera? Sort of open are what are your current plans for education and what type of educational accomplishments have you achieved? But again, they're okay and I would accept them. But I think far better would be tell me about your education and skill training from high school to today. Or how do you feel about getting more education or skill training? Or what advantages could you accrue by continuing your education? So I think it's the same kind of format, but notice in the fully open, you're really helping them to think about how where they've been in the past, how they feel about it, and some of the questions even how you're helping them by asking the question to solve their own problem rather than having us solve the problem. So next one, have you ever worked before? Here's some different versions. Tell me about the jobs that you've held in the past. What work experience do you have in the past? Where have you worked? Um, my questions are, I've given you 4 examples. Tell me about some of the jobs that you've held and what you learned in those jobs. Or please tell me a little bit about your work history. I'm really interested in what you did, how long you worked there, what made you decide to leave. And if the person has not worked at all, then what kind of jobs come to mind when you dream about a job that you like? What do you think that you would enjoy and why? And then last but not least, when you think about your work history, tell me what jobs that you've held, which ones you might be willing to do again, and which jobs you would never want to go back to and why. So again, it's open, tell me the story. And then the very last one I'll show you is where have you been looking for employment? Again, I can just say indeed.com on a website, McDonald's, so it's closed. How have you been job searching? Have you been looking for work? I always am fearful that depending on how you ask the question, that the question itself even sounds judgmental, like you're judging me as I answer. Like I just found this, I'm in a study. I want to go into this. It's a medical study. It's about flu, and they're looking for older people. So I decided it was through my doctor's office. And so I just went in and they asked me if I'm a smoker. And just the way they ask the question, I feel it's just weird, but I feel judged because the answer to the question is that I am a former smoker. And so I always want to stop them and go, but I only smoked when I was in college and I was a social smoker. And I only smoked if we were out like at a bar drinking, and I never owned a pack of cigarettes, and I didn't wake. Like I want to tell them this whole story because I feel like they're already judging me. And so I don't know when depending on how the question is asked, people do feel judged. Sort of open, what type of work and qualifications do you have? It still kind of sounds to me like information gathering, you're filling out a form. Where have you been looking for work? What kind of work have you been looking for? What did you do? So mine, when you have been looking for work, what's been successful for you? I can tell you my nephew, who, I mean, I'm just so involved with it with my nephew. He looks for work, and I'm sure you guys experience this because this is not unique. He applies for jobs on Indeed.com and other websites. He uses the workforce website in the Orlando area. Employers never bother to send anything. They don't tell you that they got your resume. They don't tell you that they're not going to call you in. And then my one nephew went for a job interview and they say, we're going to decide by Monday. And then they never even send him anything saying we decided on somebody else or hold up, something came up. As a job seeker, you're just sort of like, you're just in the dark. It just not good manners to me. But what avenues have you been using when seeking employment? Where are you now in your job search process? What steps have you been able to take to prepare to find a new job or to find a job? What steps do you think you're going to need to take in order to be able to find a job? Again, I want you to see within that, that is clearly saying we're not finding the job for you. Like, I'm helping you to figure out what you need to do, because one of the things, I know I said this in the live training, people come in and go, I heard you're going to get me a job. And like, we want to scream, like, we don't get you a job, you get your own damn job. We hope, and so it's to be able to say, well, what steps do you think that you're going to need to take in order to find a job? It's clearly putting the onus on them. And how is your job search going? So those are, again, I just took like categories: GED, education, job search, etc. Because I know that we always have participants who are coming in that are in some of those categories. So if I had a desk guide or a cheat sheet, those would be some of the categories, some of the questions that I would want to have written. So I guess that then opens it up, and I do want to hear from you. So either unmute or you can use chat. But why is it that we find asking these open-ended questions so difficult? What might make it easier? Do you guys have ideas for how can that become more ingrained in us? How can we incorporate this skill into your participant case management sessions, asking more open and fewer closed? Melissa, you've raised your hand again. Yay.
I'm sorry. You know, I like to
No, this is good.
I'm gonna personally, for me, it's not difficult because, as you can see, I like to talk. I like to talk to people. I like to, share about myself, and then, in turn, most people share some of their selves with you if you open up to them. So, it's not been difficult for me to ask open-ended questions because I really do enjoy talking to people and finding out how we can help them more.
What would it but what would make it easier for people then who aren't like you?
I would think that put yourself in the mindset that you want someone to explain something to you. So in order to get an explanation, you have to ask a certain kind of question, not just, Mom, can I go outside? Mom, why can't I go outside? So you have to put yourself in the mindset that you want them to give you a full-blown, explanation. I need to know why. So how do you ask the question in order to get the answers that you need? Make them talk more. What's going to make them talk more?
Okay, good. And somebody over here says, I think that on chat, I think that preparing potential questions ahead of time would make it easier to keep focused on the open-ended questions. Here's my experience with that, is that when I would have these cheat sheets, and I'm really big on them. I also had cheat sheets when I was job developing because I didn't want to get lost when I was talking to employers. So I'd say, do you mind if I take some notes while we're talking? And like, I'd have all my little cheat sheets over there. And I never had an employer or a client say, no, I don't want you taking notes. So anyway, I think that what happens is after you've done it so many times, then that becomes the new normal. And so asking closed questions feels weird because you're so now well practiced on asking the open. But I agree that the cheat sheets can help. Why is it difficult? Anybody have a thought on that?
Hi,
I
Judy.
find that,
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Felicia.
okay. I find that a lot of people think it's difficult because they're afraid to broach the subject with the customers and because they don't have that relationship built with them where they feel comfortable asking certain questions. And I think that's one of the big things. Building that relationship you feeling comfortable enough to ask the customers the question and thinking that they're going to answer you.
Right. I agree. Felicia, that's totally right. That's why I think it's so important at the very beginning to like start setting the stage, because we are going to have to get into some of these other types of questions. And if we already have the relationship, then it seems normal to have the conversation and not like you're like being nosy or something. Somebody else also. Go ahead. Rachel was saying lack of practice. Go ahead.
Jody, I think that it's difficult because at the beginning it's always hard to establish rapport, and maybe both parties are a little bit nervous, and we don't know how to establish a communication at the beginning. But I think looking approachable and friendly, it's an essential step.
I think it's also, if I say, I'm trying to get down to the bottom of the chat. I don't know why I'm not scrolling far enough. Hang on. Okay, there it is. Okay, I couldn't get to the toggle thing. The youth might have a hard time answering some of the questions, especially if they haven't been in a structured environment to help them succeed. Youth, one of the things that I think that what we're trying to do with motivational interviewing is, and I just want to react to that, is that a lot of times customers come in and they have been with other organizations who ask these routine questions that are just part of the process, lots of closed questions. And then the other agency, like gives them advice and tells them exactly what they want to do. What we're trying to do is, which I think is different, is train people how to think for themselves. What we're trying to do is empower them rather than them giving me their power by having me answer their questions, me tell them how to get childcare, me tell them what the best jobs are. Like what we're trying to do is set this up in such a way, like for those youth, that I think when you ask open-ended questions, at first it's difficult for them because they've never really thought about it. But I think the more you do it, the more practice that they get thinking for themselves and answering those kinds of questions. And I think that ultimately our goal is to train people to not need us. And one of the ways that you train them not to need us is by asking like questions that get them to problem solve things almost for themselves. Rachel is saying, yes, being curious versus controlling. Sometimes we want to control it because we want to get them in the program or we want them to do certain things. And I actually have on my notes, which I think is critical, is it's one of the ways that makes it a lot easier is just it's practicing like being curious. One other thing that I see here is, okay, I think that I covered those. I just think it's hard because we're conditioned to ask closed questions to gather information. A lot of other, again, agencies do exactly that. And so having the pre-populated is good. It's really hard, I find, to come up with open-ended questions right on the spot. So I think, having them pre-populated, good thing. Also, I don't know if this will help you. I practice this with my family. I practice it with my husband. Like when he comes home from work, I could ask him yes, no questions. I think about how I'm going to phrase it. My husband is he's the opposite of me. He is like, he is so withdrawn, introverted, shy. I don't know. I mean, not around me. He'll talk, but he is like, I know with him, if you want to get him started, you have to ask a lot of questions and they have to be the right questions. So, and I'm trying to practice this with both my nephews who are in that job search thing. It's like, ask them and get them to take control. So when you practice it with family, it's still tough. practice it with participants, becomes a little bit easier. But basically, we want to try to ask more open-ended questions. So that's all I'm going to say about that subject. And we're going to move to our next, which is giving affirmations. So the second skill sounds easy, but it's, as everything is, a little bit more complicated than it appears. But here's what's going to happen. We ask the open-ended questions. What would it take for, you to be able to get that job that you like? Does that suggest to you, the need for any kind of further education? So we ask these open-ended questions to get them to make change talk. And so then the participant makes change talk and says, yeah, I think I would like to get my education and put that behind me. Or, maybe I do need to make more of an effort to look for a job, or whatever it is that they say. I think, I can't live on unemployment. It's just not enough money. I need to find something. All of that is change talk. And we looked at that at the last session. So our goal was to increase the frequency of them making this change talk. So now that they've made it, as a coach, one of the ways that you're going to respond is to use an affirmation. We're going to cover the other option, the other alternative, but we're probably not going to do it till the next session. But you can make an affirmation. So then that sort of begs the question, what is an affirmation? An affirmation is a statement that is made by the practitioner, you, in response to whatever the participant has said or has demonstrated or has revealed. So affirmations are really sort of the act of like reflecting. They're giving people positive feedback regarding whatever their strengths or their or their efforts, not their weaknesses, feedback regarding their strengths and efforts. So when a participant displays a characteristic, a behavior, a value, anything that supports change, you can use an affirmation. So the idea is that you're building them up and you're pointing out their strengths. You're pointing out their successes, even when those successes are like tiny. You affirm any effort that they make that would lead to change. So, because what you're trying to do, again, last bullet is what we're trying to do is increase their confidence and increase their belief that they can actually make a change. So affirmations provide a way of giving people the space to see their own strengths, so that they can shift away from what's going wrong and the negative and start looking at what's going well. So we want people to focus on the positive. So, that's why, again, I don't like talking about barriers or bad habits or deficiencies, because you're undermining their belief their belief that they can move ahead, their belief in their own competence. So we don't want to emphasize what's wrong. Instead, we want to emphasize what is right. So affirmations build confidence. And now I want to show you some examples. Remember, by the way, confidence is one of the three vital signs to change. Somebody has to be ready, willing, and able. And this falls in the able. They have to be confident. So this helps to increase their readiness to take risk, leave that comfort zone. So they're really potent when you use them to reinforce change talk. So somebody says, I want a better life for my kids. That's why I want to do this. An affirmation might be, you value your children and you want to give them something more. So, and you're taking really important steps to get there. It expresses confidence in their ability to achieve their goals. So here's, again, like a little cheat sheet kind of thing. And they have to be genuine. You can't just, like, if you don't believe it, you can't say it. But that sounds like you have a really good plan. See, that's positive. It affirms that they've made a step. It sounds like you've really thought a lot about this and have some really good ideas about what you might do for childcare or transportation or in a career. Your willingness to share with me really shows me your determination, or maybe something didn't work out, like they didn't get the job they wanted. You've had a setback, but you are really trying. Look at all the progress that you've already made. So affirmations, again, they can't be fake. They have to be something that you believe. I mean, if you don't believe it, don't say it. But so you don't want to give people false praise or appease them or flatter them needlessly, because it's sort of manipulative. So let me show you paired up what a participant might say, and then then what an affirmation might look like. So I want to get my diploma. That's an example of change talk. And then me saying, as a career coach, sounds like you know that the diploma is important. That's an affirmation. I think I can learn English. And the affirmation be, you're willing to try. It sounds like you're willing to try and you believe that you can do it. So yay. I want to work on getting a certificate, because then I'd really feel better about myself. And I might say, well, you've thought a lot about this and you're seeing the value of the certificate and what that can mean to you. If I help my daughter now, she'll do better at school as she grows. You're doing what you can for your daughter. You know what's important for her. Or I want to go to the workshop. I know I have a lot to learn. And I could say, you're approaching this with such a positive attitude. So, so change talk it was on the left. I've matched it to an affirmation to that change talk. And so notice that each affirmation is really just a form of positive feedback. And I mean, there are lots of different things that you could say. There's not one right affirmation. It just has to be some piece of feedback. But I want to show you a subtle but important difference between praise and affirmations, because we need to distinguish. So the dictionary defines praise as an expression of approval. It's a compliment or it's admiration for someone or something. But what I want you to see is that praise is one directional and it contains a judgment. So when somebody compliments you, they let you know how they feel about you. So, in a sense, praise contains explicit or implicit. Sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's implicit. I statements. If somebody says, I like your recently your haircut, that's an that is the judgment of the person who just provided that bit of praise. So it's or I might say, I think, or somebody might say to a participant, to their child, I think you're very smart, or I'm so proud of you. But both of those reflect the giver, the person who's giving the praise, the giver's standards. So what that implies is you have to work to get my approval. And what's wrong with that? Well, in motivational interviewing, what's wrong with that is our approval or our disapproval as a career coach is not essential. It's not important. It doesn't need to be expressed. So what affirmations do, and where they're different, is they reflect this positive feedback about a client's strength and efforts. It's noticing, it's pointing out the strength, the specific behavior that you see. And so our goal is to enhance their self-esteem. So affirmations are not the same as praise. Affirmations are not the same as compliments. And what I want to do is I'm going to show you some examples because so here's the theory of it. Here's what it sounds like that will, I think, illustrate the difference. I am proud of you is praise. An affirmation parallel would be congratulations. You worked really hard. You deserve that job or you deserve that grade. And so I've taken it away from what I think to giving feedback to you. I think this resume is much improved. An affirmation on the same thing would be the time and energy that you put into updating your resume really shows. I think that was a really creative solution. Affirmation, your creativity shows in your problem solving. You're really thinking outside the box. Just stopping right there, what difference, if any, do you notice between praise and affirmations? I think there should be something that just jumps right off the page.
The praise has I statements and the affirmations have you.
Yes, that is there is no I in you. Exactly. And so it's retraining ourselves to not say, I believe this, I see this, I think, I'm proud, I think you did like such an excellent job. Instead, it's stop yourself, reword it and say, you really handled that situation well, or you remembered all the paperwork. That's really great. You tried really hard. You must be so pleased with yourself. And so again, it's giving them the belief, the confidence, and letting them like just feel good about the feedback. So the problems with like on the I side is who owns the, like I'm proud of you, who owns the achievement. In that it's sort of the speaker, it's not the person who did the thing. So it's praise is external judgment. And so I know it's mine. It's subtle. But it's like if you hear yourself saying I, just change it. Stop yourself and say you. And I actually think it's great, like, try it on practice on your family, practice on your friends. So I'm going to give you two scenarios to work through. And so want to work on an example. And so we have Rachel. Rachel left high school in the 11th grade. Then she went to work at the ABC Plant Nursery. She worked there a couple of years, but she got laid off. She knows she should get her high school diploma or her equivalency, but she's just tired of, she says this, like she's tired of people telling her to get it. She knows that it's holding her back in jobs and life, but she says that with all the other things happening in her life right now, she just doesn't have the time or the energy to do it. So not getting it does make her feel inadequate and maybe a little bit guilty. So what I want you guys to do, again, unmute, use chat, is start off by identifying what are, and I on purpose wrote a lot of things that are getting in her way, but I want you to identify what are Rachel's strengths. What do you see? What strengths does she have that we can build on? And then you can either do it all at the same time or do it separately. But how can I then take one of those strengths and turn it into an affirmation? So how can we affirm Rachel first? What are her strengths? And Iman, I'm sorry, my glasses. She knows she wants to make a change. That's a strength. Yep. So that's good. Her work history, she has a good work history. She's worked 2 years somewhere. And the only reason she's not working there is she got laid off. So that's, I think that's a strength. What else? So she had pretty long-term retention for a lot of our participants. She worked 2 years. She's 1 year away from obtaining her high school diploma. well, she knows she should get it. And so she's self-aware, Ronnie, excellent. She's very self-aware, and and like it seems to me she's independent minded. Like she doesn't want other people telling her what to do. I like that. She likes to think for herself, Harriet. Great, Sandy. She knows what she has to do, but she either needs some more encouragement, or, it could be that she's absolutely right. Like right now, there's just too much going on in her life, and she knows that when she does it, she wants to be successful, and that moment is not now. So that's also a self awareness. So how do I turn those strengths into an affirmation? What could I say to Rachel? Melissa, you're telling me she needs a plan, maybe, but no, I want you to tell me what exactly, like if I was sitting there with Rachel, what could I say to her? You're doing a great job changing your mindset. Good. Or it's great to see that you want to make some change. Good. Other? Well, I could scroll back and I could say, let's see, Renee, you said or no, Harriet, you said she likes to think for herself. That's actually feedback. It's like, it sounds like you're the kind of person who likes to make your own decisions, that you're the kind of person who can think for themselves. That's positive feedback. So let me show you mine, because I see that I have another one that I will get to, but oh, is somebody unmuting? Felicia?
I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I was working with Rachel, I would tell her, you did very good at deciding that you do need your high school diploma. Now let's discuss those things that you think are preventing you from getting it, and let's see what we can do to help you to achieve the goal that you want.
Okay. And the first part, what you said is not wrong at all. I am only focused right now on the affirmation part. And so the affirmation part is, it sounds like you are well aware that you need to get your diploma, or that you need to get your high school diploma. So that's the affirmation part. Then the second part is, let's talk. Now we're moving into back to open-ended questions. Let's talk about some of the things that have gotten in your way in the past. So I'm saying, tell your story. These affirmations only take like literally 5, 6, 7 seconds. It's like, I don't have to have a whole conversation around it. It's just a quick thing. Let's see. She knows what she wants to do. You have a strong work history, Rachel says, that you can build on as you take the next steps. Excellent. You're the only person who can determine if this is a good time for you or not. Excellent. I like Rachel's again. You understand yourself. You're thoughtfully exploring what you can do, or what you are and what you want. So Rachel, anyway, so I'll go to mine. What are her strengths? Long-term retention, independent minded. She's very aware, you picked up on all this, that she needs to get it. And she understands that in order to be successful, that she has to be able to focus, and she